Do you know, I woke up this morning and I listened to the radio and I thought I had been in some sort of time capsule. I whacked on Radio 4 and there was a debate going on about Brexit. And I'm like, hello, is this 2016 again? Have I woken up in the last decade? Apparently not, because the Governor of Bank of England has been saying that, well, perhaps friction trade with the EU is the cause of, or at least part of the cause of low growth in this country. 0.5%, folks. Let's all get out the bunting right now. Aren't we doing well as an economy? And so the BBC saw fit to resurrect some of the ghosts of the past and go through this whole debate again. And we thought, why don't we do the same? It's been a while since Alex and Femi had a good old ding-dong. So here he is in the studio, no less.
Hey,
it's the one and only Femi. You're sort of like first name only terms now with audiences, yeah, like a Brazilian footballer.
I'm basically Madonna.
Just Femi, yeah. Right, so here we go. We know that there's this sort of natural DNA and inclination within the Labour Party to rebuild a closer trading relationship with the European Union, something the Governor of the Bank of England has today said, warning that Brexit has damaged goods exports to the continent. You must be sitting here doing a fist pump saying, I told you so.
No, because some of us who said we shouldn't do Brexit were on the opinion that we should do whatever we can to protect working class people in this country, and Brexit has clearly hurt working class people in this country. That's been confirmed by every group, every sector of the UK economy, whether it's the Bank of England, the car industry, the fishing industry, the small business industry. Everyone's saying this has made our lives harder. And before we get into the back and forth about me saying Brexit has damaged the country and you saying, oh, but it's not been done correctly.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the old tune.
Exactly. Let's actually look at what the whole getting Brexit done correctly would have meant. You were in the Brexit party, Nigel Farage and Tice's party, and your policy was no deal Brexit,
okay,
which would have meant not having a deal with our closest neighbours. And there is no country on earth that doesn't have a trade deal with its closest neighbours, which means doing something that every successful economy on the planet has chosen specifically not to do.
We don't have a deal with them in services, and yet that sector's going great guns. Gangbusters in the UK. The services industry is on fire, and there was no deal with the EU.
It's still been damaged by it. You're hearing with the financial services, the mayor of the City of London.
So it's going great guns. It's got massive growth, but it's been damaged.
It's been it is possible to do better than we currently are. In fact, if you look around the country, lots of people are not feeling that things are great. There is a lot of room to improve, and even if it's doing well in the financial sector, so bankers doing well, doesn't really help the working class people on the ground, and it has been damaged. And going back to, like I said, in terms of doing Brexit properly, your policy was doing something that every successful economy on the planet has chosen specifically not to do. So that is, by definition, economic vandalism.
I don't think it's fair to say that that was our policy. I think the EU has its own agenda.
No. Your policy was no deal Brexit. Your policy was no deal Brexit. Yes or no? Your policy was no deal Brexit.
Leave without a deal.
So doing something that every successful economy on the planet has chosen not to do.
What we now have the ability to do is we have the ability to trade with the rest of the world. And it's interesting, actually, David Lammy went over to Samoa for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and instead of talking about reparations, said, you know, one of the best things we can do is trade freely and fairly and properly with our former colonies, with countries, say, in Africa. Now, that's music to my ears. That's what got me into Brexit in the first place when I was living in Ghana. So you do appreciate, though, that where we do have opportunities with Brexit is to strike trade deals, bespoke agreements with those countries, not things that are being usurped by the corporate cartel that currently reside in Brussels.
Outside the EU, yes, we should be reaching out to countries and doing that. But as the EU, we also had an everything but arms trade deal with like 50 countries in Africa. So there was progress. And as one of the leading members of the EU, we should have been pushing for more of that. But it wasn't a level playing field.
It decimated their GDP. Ghana's GDP was knocked off by about a third after that deal.
Because of the everything but arms trade deal.
Yeah, because a third of their GDP came from tariffs. And unfortunately, because of non-tariff barriers, what's actually happened is the big companies, the Unilevers, the Nestle's are having a grand old time with this, but they've locked Africa in agrarian poverty.
Which means we need to have more left-wing policies to control big multinational corporations, which is a sort of
we can't really do in the EU, can we? They love the big multinational corporations. They're basically the ones who write the legislation.
Because we kept electing conservative governments that don't like to control multinational corporations and sending them to represent us in Brussels. If we wanted to actually produce more left-wing progressive things that would actually help working class people, not just here at home, but across the world, we should vote more for left-leaning parties. But again, what we're talking about right now is how has Brexit affected the UK? And it has, according to every sector. The National Nuffield Trust said it's damaged the NHS. The National Federation of Fishing Associations said that it's cost £300 million. The Small Business Federation, they've recently been saying to the Labour government, you need to fix this. It is hurting people, and it is because of a policy that you and people like Nigel Farage supported.
Can it actually be fixed when the EU constantly want to throw throw more and more regulation at the situation. Regulation which has stymied their ability to create any big industries or growth in the dot-com sector.
This regulation
They're
argument...
dragging behind the rest of the world when it comes to innovation.
This regulation argument doesn't make sense because by definition, Brexit means double regulation. It means that in order to trade with the EU, we have to follow both the UK regulations and the EU regulations in order to cross that border.
But you would think that actually,
it means extra checks. So
shedding some of that red tape would be good for industry.
Which is why the Small Business Federation has said that the extra red tape of Brexit is the regulation that is strangling our businesses. So on every level, you have hurt this country. You, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, you promised that it would help working class people, and what you have done has hurt them.
I don't think that's entirely true because I've been spending most of the day talking to lorry drivers who are pretty pleased, actually, that their salaries could potentially be going up as a result of not having competition from busting workers from other countries.
It hasn't kept pace with the cost of living, though, has it?
Well, no, the problem here is actually we've got a shortage.
No,
we've got a shortage, actually, of lorry drivers as a result of actually having a whole glut of people coming in here who put them out of work, now going back to their home countries.
And the staff shortage has only added to inflation.
Let's talk about America, shall we? Well, you can talk about free movement actually pushing up house pricing, which is one of the worst parts when it comes to cost of living. But let's talk about America. No, I know we haven't. We also haven't been controlling immigration. And Brussels wants a free movement yet again back on the table in terms of the youth mobility scheme as part of any sort of cooperation we do with them. Oh, yes, that's going to work brilliantly. What they're trying to do is offload people they don't want in their own country. But let's talk about America, because Donald Trump is potentially going to be offering us a free trade deal. The last time we had negotiations about trading freely with the United States was under a Trump presidency. Now, a lot of people are sort of speculating that part of this will be he would want us to have a more Atlanticist approach, i.e. he's not a big fan of the EU. He thinks they do over-regulate. Do you think that there is business to be done with Donald Trump?
By comparison, when the EU tried to negotiate with Donald Trump, they managed to get an agreement in writing that nothing in that agreement would damage our ability to nationalise or renationalise healthcare. So nationalised healthcare was protected if we were in the EU. Compared that with Donald Trump, who has said that in any trade deal he does, he will make sure that he addresses the imbalance and the freeloading, whereby non-American health services are able to extract what he calls unfairly low prices.
Do you think that's going to be the case now with RFK?
Let me finish my point. Unfairly low prices from US drug makers. So his explicit aim is to make the NHS pay more for drugs so that Americans pay less. That's what he will be demanding of us. And if we go into negotiations with him, that's what's on the table, the NHS.
Right, and then Donald Trump likes doing a deal. He's very transactional. So what you turn around and say is that is beyond conscionability. We're not going to be doing that. And you actually work to reduce tariff barriers. They're our biggest trading partner.
And so he's going to bend
the knee. Is a negotiation.
And so you reckon Donald Trump is going to bend the knee to the UK and just do what we say? You know,
I think it's worth sitting down and having some sort of deal with America. They are our biggest trading partners.
No, let's be clear. We do 17.6% of our trade is with the US, 46.7% of our trade with the EU. Our biggest trading partner is by far the EU, and that's what you've damaged. So again, in terms of Mr. America...
I think it would be fair to say that it's most countries in the world. You talk about people trading freely with their neighbours, which I totally agree with. If the EU stayed as a free trading bloc, I think most people would quite like that. But the problem is it became an overbearing political organisation, a behemoth that wanted to put in place foreign affairs policy, social policy, and they were essentially the direction of travel now across Europe is against that. You've got to listen to the will of the people. You've got to uphold democracy. And if you look at every country...
You referred to Brexiteers this morning as a minority.
Every single country...
This morning you referred to Brexiteers as a minority. It's no longer the majority. You are the minority.
So actually, no, we won the majority in that referendum.
But not now.
I was using it in... You knew I was using it in sarcastic terms.
All the evidence shows that you are in the minority now. The demographic shift, older people voting leave, young people voting remain, you are the minority now. So the will of the people is against Brexit.
There's not going to be another referendum.
Well, there will be.
Of course there's not going to be, because not even the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer would have been first in line to want to bring that to the table. So I think your work there is rather wasted and in vain.
The people of the UK will always...
Femi, have you seen any European elections lately? Have you seen any elections going on the European continent? See what's happened in the Netherlands. See what's happened in Italy. See what's going on in Germany. See what's going on in France. See what's going on in Sweden.
The people of the UK will always, in every election, want a better quality of life. And because Brexit is constantly making us poor, that means that undoing Brexit will always be on the table.
As for your point about... The people of the UK care about sovereignty, and the people in our parliament listening to us.
The people of the UK say that we want to be back in the EU because they know that it is making us poor. As for your point about European elections, even Marine Le Pen,
don't want to go back in the EU.
All the evidence suggests that. You're aware.
What evidence?
You're aware that you're aware that it was the under 65 population of the UK that voted Remain. It was the older people that voted Leave. So by definition, I think it was about 2019 that we crossed the point whereby because of demographic shift, old people dying, young people coming onto the voter base.
Oh, here we go. It's all the voters are gonna die. Well, do you know what's happening down in the Gen Z section of society? A lot of those actually are more interested in sovereignty and nation states and borders than their predecessors. The big issues on the doorstep politically, we know what they are, and it isn't freedom of movement.
It's cost of living. It's cost of living, which you've made worse. The biggest issue for people in the UK, cost of living, which you have made worse. According to the Bank of England, you've taken £1,000 a week, £1,000 a year from every household.
In this whole debate that the EU for you always is completely exonerated. It does nothing wrong. It doesn't overregulate.
My literal job was to criticise the EU back when I was working in Brussels. I know there's tons of problems with the EU. In fact, I would have run a more honest Brexit campaign because I would have dealt in truth. But the fact is, on balance, leaving the EU has made people poorer. Pardon?
Why didn't you run a more honest Brexit campaign?
Because I know that on balance, leaving the EU makes people poorer, and I'm not willing to sacrifice working class people on the altar of your idea of sovereignty.
There's two sides to this narrative, because leaving the EU is making certain sectors richer. There are other people who are massively gaining from this.
Large multinational corporations that can...
No, they're the ones with 30,000 lobbyists in the corporate cartel who have actually been part of cheap inward migration, who see profit margins as the bottom line.
Alex, the larger corporations can afford the extra red tape at the border. The smaller ones can't afford it, and so the large corporations are out-competing the smaller ones.
This was exactly the argument. This was exactly the argument of what the EU were doing to small and medium-sized enterprises.
You've helped the large multinationals, given them an advantage over small companies, and screwed the little guy. That's what you've done.
But that is what the EU did. That was the EU's very model.
That's what leaving the EU has done.
That's what leaving the EU has done. Well, do you know what, Femi? I think what we need now is a government, and thank goodness, actually, one thing I can say is Sir Keir Starmer and even Rachel Reeves have said we're not going to look to rejoin the single market and the customs union. That's music to my ears, and democracy will be upheld. What we now need is a government.
Here
we go. Femi, who's with the Wikipedia of every last bit of polling evidence that doesn't exist. I'm afraid to say I don't think people do want to go back into the EU. When you look at its declining economic model, when you look at election results happening across continental Europe,
even Marine Le Pen dumped the idea of France leaving the EU because she saw what happened over here and was like, yeah, that's going to lose me some votes, and she dumped that idea. The EU might have European countries might have criticisms of the EU, but they know that it doesn't make sense to leave it because they've watched us.
If you look at public opinion in France, there is a huge shift away from people who support the EU.
And the majority,
farmers protest. I've got to wrap this up. We're going to an advert break now.
And the majority still want to be in the EU, right?
I don't think that is true at all.
Says who? What polls have you got now?
What polls have you got, Sunshine?
Every YouGov poll since 2018.
YouGov in France. All right, I'll believe that when I read it.